Hello viewers, I'm your host Uzma Jafri with another episode of South Asia Focus. Let's begin the show with Pakistan, where terrorists have a free run and they continue to target civilians. The government has failed to act against terror outfits and faces severe criticism. We have a report.
The tiny Christian community in Pakistan's Quetta city was in a somber but defiant mood. A day after two suicide bombers stormed a packed church and killed at least 9 people. At least 56 people were wounded in the attack, the latest claimed by Islamic State in an online statement. In the restive southwestern city capital of Baluchistan province, there was no evidence for its claim. Social workers and relatives of victims vowed not to bow down to terrorists, and most claimed they would not be deterred from attending Christmas services.
हौसले बुलंद हैं और वो पूरा मन है, कोई ऐसी बात नहीं है और हम दहशतगर्दों से नहीं डरते, बल्कि हम बराबर अपने इबादतगाहों में जाएंगे.
Some members of the community also gathered to protest against the attack. They demanded protection from the government. The priest of the attacked church held a news conference and strongly condemned the attack.
इस दहशतगर्दी के नतीजे में हमारे मर्दों, ख़वातीन और बच्चे तकरीबन 9 अफराद शहीद हुए और 50 के करीब शदीद ज़ख्मी हुए. आज क्वेटा की तारीख़ का स्याह दिन है और हम तमाम मसीही कौम की जानिब से इस दहशतगर्दी के वाक़े की शदीद मज़म्मत करते हैं और जिन ख़ानदानों के अफराद इस सानिए में शहीद और ज़ख्मी हुए उनके लिए दुआ गो हैं.
Since 2016, ISIS has been very active in Pakistan and especially in Baluchistan. There have been 5 major attacks in Baluchistan claimed by ISIS, including the latest one on the church. The other 4 involved Shah Nurani attack, where 52 were killed and more than 100 were injured. The Quetta Police Academy attack, where 61 were killed and more than 100 injured. The civil hospital attack, killing 74 and injuring 100, and the Pir Rakhel Shah Shrine in Jalmaksi, where 20 were reported dead and dozens others were injured. Despite frequent attacks in Baluchistan, Pakistan government and security forces have failed to curb the menace. While unveiling a new national security strategy, US President Donald Trump asked Pakistan to take decisive action against terrorism.
And we have made clear to Pakistan that while we desire continued partnership, we must see decisive action against terrorist groups operating on their territory. And we make massive payments every year to Pakistan. They have to help.
Despite receiving foreign funds to counter terrorists operating from its soil, there is no visible plan, nor apparently the will from Islamabad to counter the elements spreading radicalism and extremism.
The rise of Islamic fundamentalists and terrorists in Pakistan is hampering peace in the region. My colleague Ravi Khandelwal recently spoke to Ioana Barakova on the prevailing conditions in Pakistan. Have a look.
The army always remains strong in Pakistan, and despite that, there are several terror outfits, those who are operating from that soil. So how do you see the nexus between the army and the terror outfits?
Pakistan has a history of state-sponsored terrorism. For example, Lashkar-e-Taiba have always been seen as a reliable proxy in the fight with India. And also, let's take an example with the Afghan Taliban, which since its creation has always been financially and militarily supported by the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency and the Pakistani Army. However, Afghanistan is not the only country where Pakistani leaders are flirting with corrupt clients. For example, in Kashmir, there is also a lot of terrorist organizations that are being funded by the army.
Rohana, you are doing a research on Pakistan. So how do you describe Pakistan as a state?
Well, the local conditions of poor state governance, corruption, and weak criminal justice system have actually induced a state of lawlessness that induces terrorism and criminality. And because it's inherently established on the grounds of religion, religious minorities, although they exist, they are not so overly targeted. However, social minorities, particularly academicians, scholars, intellectuals, are currently persecuted and are subject to enforced disappearance, to cruel torture, because of the fact that they're aiming to raise their voices and speak about the human rights violations that are intoxicating the country.
Pakistan is a state, where democracy failed to exist, None of the prime ministers, they have completed their 5 years. The recent one is the Nawaz Sharif government, The prime minister has to get down because of the corruption charges. So how do you see the democratic system in Pakistan, where none of the prime ministers failed to complete their 5-year term?
It's a curious paradox where you observe the history of all democratic rulers. As you have said, none of them managed to fulfill their term. However, no Pakistani generals, army generals, have ever been alleged in corruption cases, which brings a viewpoint that the army members, the personnel, are preferentially treated, and it creates an environment where they are seen, even those who are being incriminated in fraudulent behavior or irregular activities, as simply the rotten apples, rather than who are still trying to keep Pakistan's interests at heart. So they're simply like an exception to the rule. Whereas all democracy, all public life, and all public scenery is being incriminated and plagued by corruption.
Moving on to Afghanistan, where US Vice President Mike Pence made an unannounced visit to meet its leaders and underscored US commitment to the country only a few months after US President Donald Trump agreed to an open-ended war against the insurgents in Afghanistan. A report.
On a dark and wintry night, only 4 days ahead of Christmas, US Vice President Mike Pence reached Afghanistan to meet US defense personnel in Afghanistan. Pence motivated the troops who have been resisting Taliban in precarious condition for years.
Now, before I left the Oval Office yesterday, I asked the President if he had a message for our troops here in Afghanistan. And he looked at me without hesitation from behind the Resolute desk and he said, "Tell him I love him." And during this special season, I know that President Trump was speaking for every American.
In a reversal of his campaign call for a swift withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan, Trump in August pledged a stepped-up military campaign against Taliban insurgents and signaled the United States would send more troops to fight in what is the longest war in its history.
We vowed to win this war on our terms, on this soil. And together with our allies, we came here to Afghanistan to liberate its people and prevent the terrorists from ever threatening our homeland again. And we are staying in that fight, and we will see it through to the end. First, your Commander-in-Chief has made it clear to our allies, our partners, and our enemies that the United States of America will no longer be bound by arbitrary timetables in Afghanistan. As the President has said, America's enemies must never know our plans. They must never believe they can wait us out.
While cautioning Pakistan for its constant support to nurturing the terrorism from its land, Pence said that President Trump had given new authorities to directly target the terrorists and militants no matter where they hide.
And we will never ignore the dangers you face, even when they emerge from beyond the borders of Afghanistan. You know, for too long, Pakistan has provided safe haven to the Taliban and many terrorist organizations. But those days are over.
Pence also met President Ashraf Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah in capital Kabul. US administration has been relying on these two to help rebuild the war-shattered country of Afghanistan.
More than 11,000 US troops are involved in training Afghan security forces and carrying out counter-terrorism operations in Afghanistan with the aim to trounce Taliban or bring it on the table of negotiation. Moving on. Now we talk about the much-touted China-Pakistan economic corridor, which has been facing strong opposition by locals in Pakistan. Experts in London gathered to discuss the legal, economic and environmental impacts of the multi-billion-dollar project.
A group of experts, including noted environmentalists, gathered in London to discuss the legal, geopolitical, economic and environmental impacts of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. The event at Royal Asiatic Society in London was organized by European Foundation for South Asian Studies, a think tank based in Amsterdam. Junaid Qureshi, a Kashmiri writer and director of the think tank, highlighted the legal aspect of CPEC corridor as it passes through disputed territory of Gilgit-Baltistan.
On 26th of October 1947, the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir made an appeal to India to come to its rescue, to which India agreed, requesting the Maharaja to sign an instrument of accession which would serve as the legal basis for India's intervention. This instrument of accession is a legal document executed by the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, thereby agreeing to accede to the Union of India and in essence changing Jammu and Kashmir's legal status for the first time since the Dogras took over. Flowing from this legality, the instrument of accession also obligates the Union of India to clear the state of Jammu and Kashmir from foreign forces, in this case, the Pakistani forces.
Dr. Shabir Chaudhry, an activist from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, said the CPEC, besides its economic aspect, has salient parts which are hidden and will have great geopolitical and strategic significance and which could be interpreted as having a strong imperialist agenda. He further stated that Pakistan's ruling elite has a long history of taking dictations from powerful allies.
CPEC comes through my territory. I should be consulted, local people should be consulted, they should be part of the negotiations. No one has even cared to ask them. They are not part of anything. It's 28,000 square miles, full of resources, natural resources. So if there's no political concern, there's no CPEC. We should have been the first people, we are the people who matter. And no one has asked us anything.
Dr. Troy Sternberg, an environmentalist from the Oxford University, said the landscape where the construction of the CPEC is proposed will be one of the main challenges for the Chinese multi-billion-dollar project, as one has to deal with the physical limitations. The China-Pakistan economic corridor, a crucial component of Beijing's much-hyped One Belt, One Road initiative, remains a hot topic internationally. The collection of infrastructure projects that are currently under construction throughout Pakistan is an undertaking that has been advertised as a tale of success and the ultimate example of how two countries could prosperously collaborate. However, after the initial euphoria, clear evidences provide for the reality that such a politically charged economic project is also a ground for brewing trouble.
China-Pakistan economic corridor will make a drastic impact in South Asia. To speak more on this, we are now joined by Fernando Burgess of Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. Mr. Fernando, why has there been a resistance against CPEC project in Pakistan and its occupied territories?
Well, I think that first of all, what the world has to understand, because CPEC, of course, in the region in South Asia, everybody knows about CPEC, but nowadays, well, the world is still not very well aware. So as the narrative gets more elaborated, what people have to understand is that there is no CPEC without Balochistan. Balochistan is the main geopolitical area, and the port of Gwadar is the key. So without Balochistan, there is no CPEC. So when you think of CPEC and when you look at CPEC, to begin with, it cuts through a disputed territory, Gilgit-Baltistan. So to begin with, it's already against international law, but then it goes through, and as it ends in Gwadar, in the port of Gwadar, what you have there are Chinese military and Pakistani security agencies protecting the workers who are not Balochis. So if you are Baloch and if you're not Baloch but concerned with human rights, the main question is for whom? Who will pay the cost? And it's very clear that so far it's been the Balochi people.
But despite strong opposition, Pakistan and China are still carrying on with the project. Are human rights organizations concerned about this?
Yeah, of course. They are unaccountable to international law. They are not. I mean, Pakistan does have a human rights commission, and they say that they are looking to human rights regarding, well, concerning the CPEC, but organizations like mine and like many others working with human rights on the ground and working with the diaspora, we all know that the human rights violations are taken indiscriminately all over the country. And China, we know that China is not a champion of human rights, it's on the contrary. So of course, it's the worst combination of states when it comes to human rights. So.
Thank you, Mr. Fernando. Moving on to Nepal, the country's capital city of Kathmandu, which attracts tourists from around the world with its lush green valleys and streams of water, has lately been severely impacted by the growing pollution, industrialization and vehicles. To nip the problem of pollution in the bud, the government announced work to create a vehicle-free zone in the city. Our report.
Every tourist visiting Nepal is bound to visit Thamel, one of the most vibrant and colorful markets. You will see more foreigners than locals in this market. It is heaven for tourists visiting the city. It has several hotels, restaurants and shops that cater specifically to tourists. However, as the tourist footfall grew, dust, traffic and pollution also grew, fading the city's sheen. With the joint efforts of stakeholders of the tourism sector, local activists, local bodies and Kathmandu Metropolitan Traffic Police Division, the region has now been declared vehicle-free area. Exuberance is back in the market and smiles on the faces of visitors.
I prefer these zones in comparison to the vehicle zones, mainly because, like, you know, always having to constantly like look over your shoulder, and also just be startled by like random vehicles or motorcycles coming through. Also, I just find it that it's just a lot more easier to navigate as well. Just these zones, you can just feel like you can get to one place much easier. You're just a lot more safer. Yeah, just more welcoming. So yeah, that's why I'd like to a vehicle-free, or this district remain a vehicle-free zone.
Tourists and pedestrians are now able to enjoy peaceful walks without having to worry about the vehicles. With vehicles staying out, the noise pollution levels in the area have also come down. Ruben Gandharva, a street musician in Thamel, hailed the decision and said that his audience had also grown in numbers.
त्यसले गर्दाखेरि टुरिस्टहरूलाई पनि सजिलो भएको छ र हाम्रो लागि पनि राम्रो छ। अब यहाँ गाडीहरू आएर व्यापारमा हिँड्न अहिले अप्ठ्यारो थियो हैन, अहिले खुला रूपमा हिँड्न पाइया छ, राम्रो छ, हामीलाई एकदम राम्रो गरिरहेको छ। पहिला एकदम सानो एरियामा साइडमा हिँडेर विदेशीहरू पनि राम्रोसँग पनि बोल्न नसक्ने अवस्थामा हुनुहुन्थ्यो, गाडीको हर्नले अनि गाडी आउने जाने गर्नाले त्यस्तो थियो। अहिले विदेशीहरू पनि आनन्दले बसेर गफ गर्न सक्ने, बसेर एकछिन बसेर बाटोमै बसेर भए पनि एकछिन गफ गरेर कुराकानी गर्न सक्ने अवस्था छ, राम्रो छ।
Earlier in April, the Metropolitan Traffic Police Department had banned the use of horns for vehicles in a bid to cut down the noise pollution in Kathmandu Valley. The new rules, however, do not apply to emergency vehicles.
It is a great decision by the authorities as the air quality of the Kathmandu city has been constantly degrading. Moving on, portrayal of the Indian cultural carries an indispensable element of music. It has been practiced and cherished in different forms for centuries in India. The country is also home to some of the finest musicians on the planet. One such legend, A.R. Rahman, mesmerized the audience in India's entertainment capital, Mumbai. Have a look.
A.R. Rahman's tour concert, Encore, celebrating the maestro's 25 years in the music industry, left the audience spellbound in the Brabourne Stadium of Mumbai. The concert had various young as well as veteran singers who rendered at the tunes of the maestro that captivated the audience. Ace singer Mohit Chauhan cast a magical spell on audience when he performed songs from all-time musical blockbuster Rockstar. Rahman, who is widely recognized for integrating Indian classical music with electronic music, brought out the best of other singers through his composition. The musical performances were manifestations of his journey from ordinary to legendary. Rahman rendered some of his classics at the concert, leaving the audience awestruck. Rahman has won 2 Oscars, 2 Grammys and a Golden Globe and has over 160 film soundtracks to his name, including the Oscar winner Slumdog Millionaire and legendary Indian films like Lagan and Rosa. The soft-spoken artist said he hoped to tune into people's memories through his concert.
I think the whole the song list and everything we have is well thought of, and then we wanted to do it in a way where we could give a maximum to people and tune into the memories.
Besides composing and singing, Rahman is also a songwriter, music producer and also plays instruments and has teamed up with other global artists including Mick Jagger, Sarah Brightman and the Pussycat Dolls in the past.
Encore is his first Indian tour after almost half a decade, and it will be his biggest in the country. Rahman has already visited Hyderabad and Ahmedabad, and his tour culminates with his performance in New Delhi. Now I leave you with some images of a 2-day flower exhibition held in Amritsar. See you next week. Take care and goodbye.